Hey there, welcome to episode 2 of the FFS Talk audio program. I'm your host, Dan Hugo. This is a show where we consider what works and what does not, what we can do about it. This is a reboot show. I stopped producing the show in 2021, making a comeback. Previous episodes are available on our current existing Spotify, used to be Anchor, Spotify for Podcasters portal. It will become more available in more places as we get this back up and running. So episode 2, moderation. Moderation is basically controlling what gets published. It can be taken as a form of censorship or as a form of just community curation, or maybe other views on that. Free-for-all rarely works. The mob has bad ideas so often. So the sort of open internet, but existing and communicating with the sort of open internet, but existing and communicating within corporate silos is a real challenge. This is my summary. Is there a way to enable that open part without corporate overlords and without watching words turn to deeds and then into destruction of civilization? It could happen. Is mob rule and cancellation a suitable replacement for due process? No, probably not. In the show notes, there are some links, some relevant links. The first one is Buy Me a Coffee. Buy Dan a coffee to support independent media productions. This is about as much advertising for funding as I will do. I also have a Ko-fi page, ko-fi.com/danhugo, buymeacoffee.com/danhugo. Both of them are just like it sounds, DANHUGO. Links in the show notes. Moderation is important, especially if you, or perhaps we, Innovate for Vegas Foundation, plan to conduct any sort of social media platform development and deployment into the world. There are various implications, whether it's just merely social, sometimes legal. So it's definitely something to think about. Anytime you present yourself on the internets, especially where the world can comment on you, you're in for trouble. Some other links I have in the show notes. 6 types of content moderation. I actually labeled it 6 phases of content moderation. It's from 2010. If you search for similar articles, it's still current today. So these suggestions are from the good old days. I say phases. These are actually, they could be implemented all in series. So yeah, phases. But yeah, 6 types. I'm familiar directly with 2, which I'll get into. Some best practice suggestions from Pennsylvania State. Best practices for managing and moderating community social media groups. This is the subject of many, many articles, so you can take your pick. I'll skim through that one. There are, I think it was also 5 steps. So when we get there, I'll step through those. I have, obviously, these are relevant, and I will comment on them. But you are encouraged to check these out. There's a study, a paper, with an abstract and everything, written and published on a ssm.com, papers.ssm.com. The business/revenue side of moderation. That's not the actual title. You can check out the paper. But this is whenever there's money involved, if you have to keep your platform alive, or if you have to satisfy your subscriber members or your advertisers, you have to keep them happy. So some moderation is with that end goal in mind. It's actually an interesting article. There's some actual mathematical considerations, balancing utility of the content with the revenue generation. So pretty good. The social credit system, it has many names. There's an obvious focus, but it's available in America too. There are various commercial attempts. There are some policies that are implemented without a lot of fanfare, where this has happened anecdotally, if not to me, if you say or do something bad over there, some platform exercises their right to kick you off. There are no First Amendment protections for commercial entities. So anyway, and then Posse, publish on your own servers, syndicate everywhere. I think it's a great idea. We'll get to that at the end. So check out those links as you like. So in the pre-internet days, and I will remind you here and then again later that I worked at Netscape in the early days. So I find all of this very interesting just from a career looking back, pondering perspective, and in a more practical sense for today. But before the internet, we used to tap our messages into stone or occasionally paint them on cave walls, and then someone else would come and cross it out. So, but word of mouth and the grapevine were actual things. You would actually hear things from people you knew or people you would run into if you're hanging out at your local and you're having a chat, you're having a session maybe, and you're getting the lay of the land. You're hearing this and that from your various people. So I'll put that aside. You would generally hear things about local things from local people, from people you knew. You could assign your own trust, and you could believe or disbelieve. Historically, there were town criers that would share news with, they would move along, yelling the news to the people in a community, and then move to the next one. There were mail and news; those were actual paper, and then radio and television came along, and suddenly we all started having shared experiences. We'd all hear the same, Walter Cronkite or whatever back then. So back in the 50s and 60s, especially the 60s. So common experience, common awareness eventually devolved into like ratings and becoming more popular and becoming sensational. And actually sensationalism, I'll leave it to you to check out the real story of yellow journalism, the fact that headlines are composed for attention, not necessarily accuracy. The author, the byline, the people in the byline very rarely have the authority to write the headline. So that's usually a business proposition, not necessarily about the story. More interesting though, I think whenever you disagree with someone or argued with them, if it was in person, it probably had a different tenor. You knew each other, or you could see each other, or in some cases were in range of an extended arm. So arguments had a little bit more at stake, or the people in the arguments had more at stake. The tendency to mouth off had consequences sometimes. So I think it may have been slightly less frequent, or at least there was more intent. The cost was more immediately realized. And by the way, if you did it in public, other people would see you. So you would see that, person A and person B got into it. Person B disagreed. Person A punched person B. Now everybody knows person A is a hothead, etc. So there were public consequences, whether there was cancellation or not, whether you were told to leave the establishment, come back tomorrow, or never return, and so on. It's kind of like cancellation, I guess. But it was more personal, not so anonymous. The uncomfortable and even dangerous interactions of today are not new. Doxing, stalking, these are old ideas, just made a little bit more convenient. There was a need back then to actually do something, to be a little bit more proactive. Now you are a couple of clicks and searches away from starting your harassment journey, I suppose. So the internet is not the main culprit, although it has certainly lowered the bar, in my opinion. So the early years, publishing anything was a possibility. It was the wild, wild west. I used to work at Netscape when I was at Bandcamp. Now I worked at Netscape after Navigator 3.0, before Communicator 4.0, so right in that window. I actually worked on security, so secure email especially, but everyone in the company was essentially testing the product every day. So you had unblocked access to the internet, a pretty beefy connection at Netscape. And there was really no moderation internally of what you wanted to view or what you wanted to interact with. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with Usenet, which started around 1983, I believe it was. So news groups, the first decentralized messaging platform. All manner of content available on Usenet, alt binaries. Now, since Netscape had a inbuilt news client, it had to be able to reassemble multi-part UU encoded messages to reconstruct images and display them. So there was really there were no rules. You could walk by people's cubicles back in the cubicle days, and who knows what they'd be looking at in the name of testing the product. But anyway, so there was, and of course, as video, the very early days of the little tiny QuickTime videos, anything goes. So the early years, and so people were publishing anything. So that was part of the thing, was that you had to be able to enable people in the world to take advantage of this new medium, publishing their media of different types of mediums. Now, so the whole point, though, was that the empowering nature of the internet became very apparent very early. If you could type a couple of angle brackets and you could make skillful use of the blink tag, you were on your way, and you could you just buy a domain. I bought my first domain. When did I buy? I bought my first domain in, it's actually reallycool.com. I bought it in when was it? It was 1997? 1996, I believe it was. I had a nick handle, DH1426, and my first domain I purchased because I was tired of using providers such as my school. I used to be Hugo at jarthur.hmc.edu. Maybe I still am. I should check that. I used to be Hugo at HMC Vax, I think, and so on. So then I had a Netcom account, and then I had a Best account, and I said, you know what? I'm tired of having to change my email address for people. So those were the very early days of like, oh, I can just have my own presence. And it started with an email address and a mail server. And then, oh, I can just add a web server and I can publish my own web page, which I did. So back in those days, anyone with a couple of actually, the Internic and then eventually Network Solutions, I think they were charging $75 for domain names. And those were interesting times. So yeah, you could purchase your own domain name and be up and running, which I did. So the ability to publish anything you want will make a comeback later in this presentation. I think it's the only way. The rise of social media, I think, is probably it was a harbinger for disaster. Blogger, I remember when Blogger came out, it was this like insane. You could template your blog entries. You could use the I can't remember what the general format. It's sort of like Jinja, if you're a Python person, but it's the double curly braces. I think that's what they used. So you could type away, you could create your content, you could push it to your friends, you could share the link with your friends in an email, and you could you could link to other blogs, you could link to your other blog entries on your own blog, web logging, if you're not familiar. So Blogger came out, and then platforms like Orkut and Friendster. Yeah, nobody knows about those. MySpace came out, and of course, everybody was friends with Tom. I still have my MySpace page. I have logged into it recently. I don't use it, and none of my MySpace friends, I guess, still use it either. So it's not of much use, but for posterity memorabilia, a little throwback. But these platforms came out and enabled people to not only publish their content, but also to connect to other people. So as soon as you start networking, and you can publish your content, most GeoCities was also in there. I can publish anything I want, and people can interact with it, whether it was becoming my friend or connecting with I can't remember if MySpace had the like button yet. I guess I could look. But essentially precursors to Facebook, in fact, and Twitter. When Twitter came along, it was launched at South by Southwest, a novel way to text everyone. I don't know if you remember this, but the 140 character limit was based on SMS, text, simple message service, text message size constraints. So you could actually text more characters than that, but 140 characters plus an administrative section where you could tweet at someone, you at some name. So you could text everyone and they could respond. This was ridiculous. You could retweet using the classic RT command. So let me retweet you. You could respond and all. So this whole notion of being able to interact at scale, and of course the fail whale came along very shortly after. So interacting at scale and then maybe not interacting at scale and then interacting at scale for a little while and then not. Eventually they pulled the system together and it was able to connect people with very short messages, which are very easy to consume and also very easy to remove context and nuance, to pack everything into the limited size. But Vitriol is very compact and efficient either way. As soon as we started looking at follower accounts, how many likes did you get? How many people retweeted? How many people shared this? Engagement ranking. There was a race to not be, it used to be the first post. Did anybody look at any Slashdot fans out there? First post. So you would often see that in any forums, any place where people could comment, any place. First post was the most important thing. But now being first is not necessarily as important as being the most. And as social media took its natural turn towards adult content and or monetization and self-promotion, the influencer marketplace, the entrepreneurial influencer marketplace, being the most ideally would lead to most monetized. So the main challenges on a social platform, anything that is not yours. So I should include the fact that you are still welcome to return to the old days as I am and publish your own stuff, publish on your platform that you control. I happen to be a software engineer. I like experimenting with some ideas, which I'm talking about today. I'm also, in classic engineer fashion, I ponder and design more than implement and deploy. So it takes a while. I will say, when I first started experimenting with personal blogging or personal publishing, I guess, it was a sloppy time. People could just throw stuff up, literally throw it up. And it was very efficient for ideation, not so much for maintenance, but you could very easily kick off a site as JavaScript became more capable back in the DHTML days before Web 2.0. It's still Web 1.01 or something. So you could actually do some cool stuff. I actually implemented a virtual desktop scheme on my site for a while. So you could interact with content in draggable windows. It was fairly basic, but it was kind of cool. So the ability to do anything you want has given way to the ability to do what other people want. So you take advantage of the publishing platform that you don't have to deal with, and it is monetized by your action, your running on the wheel, turning the cranks, convincing your friends to do the same. Likes and shares are engagement. Engagement is monetizable. So I'm a fan of self-publishing, which we'll get to. Posse, I mentioned that earlier. So the main challenge is, generally speaking, and I will point out, I think I did at the top of the show, I have two practical examples from my own career that we'll get to. So the main challenge is, though, whenever you have a platform where user-generated content, UGC, user engagement, user-generated content, so you got your authors, the 1%, maybe nowadays with monetary incentives, it's closer to the full 10%. Usually it's the 1% of your users are generating content, 9% are engaging with it, and 90% are trolling or lurking, I guess. Lurking is probably more appropriate. So they're just consuming, not really interacting. Those probably don't hold anymore. There's too many there's too many opportunities to interact. The friction is all but gone. It's social expectations are what they are. So anyway, so freedom of speech, while not guaranteed at all for commercial platforms, the First Amendment applies to government platforms, and this is why the town square argument comes up so much. A town square operated by your local government, more likely, your city, your town, maybe your county, less likely your state. A town square with, or you could view public access, public broadcasts, PBS, public access, which probably receives some sort of local funding. These are opportunities that are backed by public funds for the casual individual to address the world, small or big, on a media platform that they don't have to maintain. So it's maintained with their money, but not their effort. So it's sort of like self-publishing, right? Similar because you have the right to do this because you are materially engaged and invested, perhaps, and maybe you do participate in managing it if it's a community project. But if you're receiving public funds or you're part of adjacent to the government, sure, First Amendment, equal access, and so on. All these old ideas. But if you are operating a company, and the example I always give is if you have a blog, if you have a website, and you enable comments, or you enable other people to contribute content to your personal website, however you have it set up, or maybe your club or something. Somebody wants to post something awful or offensive. They don't have that like a legally protected right to do that. You are almost certainly going to remove that content or take some other action, some corrective action perhaps. So the notion of a freedom of speech, First Amendment protection in the United States for contribution to a commercial or even a personal platform doesn't really scale. So freedom of speech notions, I should have the right to say what I want to say on your platform. Really? I'm not sure about that. Actually, I am. Monetization. This is where the freedom of speech really drops off because the YouTube is famously maligned for adpocalypse and so on. But it's generally true. If you are publishing on someone else's platform and they are paying the bills, then their monetization scheme wins. So obviously there's a little symbiotic relationship there. YouTube would be nothing without people posting content. People posting content would not have the resources to do what YouTube does or has been doing for the last 2 decades or so. Is it that long? No, it's longer than that. A little bit longer than that. So individuals don't have the resources to create a YouTube, or they did not, PeerTube, but they didn't have the resources back then. So scaling, streaming, the disk space, there's so much insane data creation at this point in the publishing of video on YouTube. It's galactic. So the symbiotic relationship means that somehow somebody has to pay for it. You are doing your part by publishing content there. YouTube is doing their part by monetizing it. And because of the symbiotic relationship, they allow you to share some of that revenue. It's generally a fair proposition. The percentages and the policies and the nebulousness of exactly when different policies kick in and when you get demonetized and so on, that's I'll leave that to them. But monetization does, in fact, and so if you flip through the business revenue paper, that is part of the discussion, is the monetization impact, revenue generation versus the content and the utility of that content for the consuming public versus the advertiser or subscriber. That could be another path. So whenever someone is paying for something, they have a say, at least a little bit, most of the time, unless you have very generous funding sources that look away otherwise. So the challenge is freedom of speech for the people using the platform, the monetization scheme and how the people providing the funding are impacted or affected by the content. I don't want my advertising appearing next to that type of content. Totally common, kind of understandable. I have a salon story about that. I used to work at salon.com. And then you want to maximize utility and minimize offense. So you want to have good, useful content. That's the Google EAT score, I think it is, EAT. Expert something. I can't remember what it stands for. I should look it up. All right, we're back. Sorry, a little break there. Expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness, the Google EAT measurements. So maximum utility for a particular piece of content, video, audio, text, whatever, and minimize offensiveness. Now, there's a saying, if you really live in a society with free speech, then you are going to offend someone. And if no one is offended, you probably don't have free speech. that is probably reasonable. And when you have the resources like the internet to spread an idea at scale, right? You're not just talking to people at your local, you're talking to anyone who has access to the internet. So if you say something that offends someone, you're probably able to say whatever you want or close to it. Just that's statistics. So I used to work at salon.com. And when I joined Salon, I was there for about a year. And I'll get into why in another time. Essentially, though, it was a magazine, and they had software developers. So when I left, my Jerry Maguire letter, you shouldn't be writing code to publish things. This has been solved. The WordPress, right? So you shouldn't be employing software developers. You should be employing more writers and IT people to manage the WordPress installation and deployment maintenance. So anyway, so I worked at Salon, and they were rolling out a new feature. They had a letters to the editor feature, just like a normal print magazine or newspaper. You could write to Salon and someone would choose an interesting letter or two or whatever and publish them. And Salon had purchased a reasonably famous platform called The Well, which was known for its community of interactive users. And I sat right next to the person from The Well who was in charge of community management. She's also really into beer. She said, we started talking about this. She said, the notion of people being able to publish a letter to the editor in real time is kind of world changing. But our discussions included things like, what happens if somebody wants to be anonymous? What happens if somebody wants to post and they're not a subscriber to Salon? What happens if somebody posts anonymously, but there's a reference to it somewhere else, so you sort of out them? So we actually considered a lot of different cases of how, like, what the mechanisms were for interaction. I found one of the most interesting things, though, was that professional writers did not like it. I'll paraphrase, but the ideas were, I am a professional writer, and you are going to let anyone write whatever they want right next to what I am publishing. So this is sort of the same argument as the advertisers on YouTube or any other platform where I don't want my advertising next to your content. Well, here, I don't want the comments from the unwashed masses to appear next to my finely polished prose, right? So there's always something. But we did roll out the letters feature. This is a good time to run over the 6 phases of moderation. So let me do that real quick. You should read the article. It's from 2010. And like I said, a lot of things have not changed. Probably the last one changed. So this has 6. And more often you'll see 5. So pre-moderation is when you moderate content in a queue and an input queue. So it may or may not be even published. It may not be seen by the world. So there's someone or something or some group of them checking stuff out, or I should say investigating or inspecting it prior to it appearing. This is profoundly difficult to scale. It probably gets very expensive. Post-moderation, this is where it has been published, but someone or something or some group of them can mark something for moderation, right? Like there's a problem here, this is not good, maybe they hide it or delete it or however that works. That is what Salon did. So again, this was kind of experimental, so we just tried this out. There was a super simple moderation tool that I included for the editor side. So you could flip through posts, you could see a little bit more information about the poster, right? So if they were anonymous for public, you could actually see if they were a subscriber. This enabled human profiling of sorts, like, oh, that person is good, or that person posts interesting stuff. That person posts angry stuff. So you could kind of classify it. This was not done formally, but it certainly was possible just at a human level. So post-moderation was what we did at Salon. Reactive moderation is community members flagging the content, right? So this is the report this post, report this content. Right? Pretty straightforward, and it is a little bit closer to community policy rather than dictatorial, draconian enforcement, right? So rather than picking favorites, or rather than like, oh, I know this person, I'm not going to moderate them as hard as that person, etc. You allow the community to do it. Distributed moderation is something, and I'm happy to see they pointed out Slashdot, probably in a modern version of this article. They may not. Slashdot is not nearly as popular as it once was. Slashdot used to essentially assign you randomly, or on some algorithmic scheme, you get to be a moderator this week or today or whatever it was. I can't remember. And you'd have some sort of moderation point total, and you would go through and moderate a couple of articles that you were presented. So this sort of pushes a little bit more pro-action on the part of community members for a short period of time, and obviously the payback, the return on investment of that time is that you are a part of the community and you are taking part in making it a better place, right? So the distributed model, not bad. I think it's good if people actually get that and they actually value their own input, right? Their own ability to shape their community. Automated moderation will become a thing. It will become more of a thing over time. The AI, I hear it's getting very, very popular. So you're going to see more content classification. You already had that. I mean, spam detection is essentially what this is. So you classify documents, whether they're video or audio or text. You can take several signals. You fuse them together and decide this content is good, this content is bad. No repercussions from that. There's the no moderation model. That's a tricky one, and I don't think that one's as popular. I don't think that's even legally possible sometimes. So it probably still happens. So when I worked at Salon, like I said, we had the post moderation scheme. We had he wasn't actually an editor, but he was, on the staff. He would flip through and moderate posts. Because it was one person doing it, it was not scalable by any means. The fact that we enabled anonymous comments, that means you didn't have to be signed in. You didn't have to provide a real name. You could be completely anonymous. I don't even remember if we required an email address. It's been a while. This meant that no one had any stake in the game. You could literally drive by and drop some vitriol and leave, and there were no consequences. So this is a bad model. User stakes, speaking of, being a member of the club is probably important. That's why you join a social media platform. I want to be in. I want to be able to follow my favorite people. It's a news source. It's a way to promote my business. It's a way to promote me. It's a way to promote my ideology, etc. So offending people may be a goal. There are some people who just like to enable, especially anonymously. So I mentioned earlier, in person, people are often not quite so free to throw punches, but if you can hide behind an anonymity and you can spread commentary with super high visibility. My favorite thing now is that people write articles about tweets and TikTok videos. They'll write 500 words on, a 280 character tweet or X post or whatever it is now, or a 30-second TikTok post, and they'll point out immediately, oh, it had 2 million views in the first, because that's what matters. Views, attention, eyeballs. So that impacts moderation. Moderation and monetization, two great tastes. So the Salon education was good for me. It informed me about a lot of these things that we're talking about today. The user stakes still matter. When you post something that gets articles written about it, when it gets a lot of reshares and references and engagement in general, you probably win and you probably benefit in some way, even if it's just a dopamine hit. Like, ooh, people like me. Not being offended is probably also a goal. Some people are there to fight, so they don't really care what you say, probably. Other people would rather not hear what you have to say. You'll be blocked, you'll be removed, complaints will be filed, and you can just go create a new account and get back to where you were. So there is often a financial motivation. So the user stake is occasionally and more frequently financial. So you're either promoting yourself, maybe you have your own business, and so you're promoting your name or your brand, or even more commonplace now, You are being paid by someone to extend their brand to your reach. The people that you know, quote unquote, know, you don't know any of these people. The people that follow you will see that you're wearing a t-shirt, you're wearing some jewelry, you are promoting a scent or a shampoo, whatever it is, a car, some electronic devices. So your reach, your brand and presence that you have developed is turned into money for you, making use of the platform. This becomes interesting and a different moderation challenge because now the platform is providing you a service and they may be monetizing you, but you are almost certainly, if you play your cards right, you are able to capitalize more than they are. So you end up still symbiotic, but leaning a little bit towards you on the parasitic side because you are now making money directly without giving any piece of it to the platform. There are a couple of models in the real world like this. The gym trainer model. If you go to a gym and you pay a membership, that's totally normal. If you're a private trainer, you may not inform the gym. So you go there and you charge a client. So you both have a membership at the gym. You charge your client some crazy rate, but you're using the gym as though you're a normal person, a normal gym rat. Most gyms do not care for this, and they will put a stop to it. They want their piece. So yeah, using a platform and making money directly from it is not always appreciated. The YouTube ad read model is somewhat similar. You can be demonetized on YouTube, so that allows you to say things that don't get attention from advertisers. They would rather not post next to certain references and topics. So no ads, no ad revenue for you, but you can still do an ad read. And by the way, this would also seemingly apply for a copyright strike. So if revenue from content is redirected to a copyright striker, I guess, the owner or alleged owner of some content that you possibly may have used for your own devices, if you have an ad read, if you are monetizing internally, so you read an ad that you're paid for directly, then the copyright strike and the monetary diversion from any ad revenue that was not under your control is less impactful, right? So directly managing your revenue generation from your content has some benefits, and the platforms recognize that. And then one that's made the news recently, which I hadn't really even thought about, but essentially exactly the same idea. Disneyland, probably Disney World, so one or both, will literally kick you out if you are a paid social media influencer who takes people on tours of the park. So you essentially have clients in the park attendees. You all go in together. You're violating their terms. You're not allowed to conduct your own business within the halls of Disney, right? Private property. You don't have a right to free speech. You don't have, you are beholden to them. And this is just another case of moderation. This is what do you allow and what do you not allow, and how will people react to that? Will they even understand it? And as so often the case, when you don't completely understand that you're violating terms or you're violating the general agreement, the intent, then you yell about it and other people say, yeah. So moderation can become a real headache, even if you're trying to do what people agreed to or what keeps the platform going. If you're a Tumblr user, I've been a Tumblr user for a long time, very passive, more of a consumer. I don't really publish there too often. I like the Tumblr Notion. I think they've done some very weird things. And when Automatic purchased them, completely changed. So Yahoo purchased them. And then Automatic, the WordPress and so on, Automatic purchased them and changed their publishing policy for adult content. Great. What you end up with is people turning away because of the new moderation policy. So the platform becomes less popular. Then they start making weird moves to try to bring people back. Tumblr today is kind of a mess, but it is what it is. I think there are some glaring, because of their moderation policy, they have to turn their attention to fixing that. And so the platform itself has kind of languished. That's my own editorial. So in general, there is nearly zero cost to express ideas or make statements versus taking action. which adds to the mix as well. I can say or do, I can say, not do. I can say, post, comment, just about anything. And the cost to me is nearly zero. I don't have to do anything. I can just say things. And this is never more apparent than, and as I am recording this on December 7th, we are obviously, we're in the aftermath of a shooting on the UNLV campus. There were deaths. It's drastically unfortunate. This is never good. This is not about that, though. But to say that posting on social media in response is substantially passive. It costs nothing to post thoughts and prayers, to reshare condolences. Not that they are meaningless, but it's too easy to do. So that's, again, a moderation question, right? Things that have no cost are important to consider. There's no true value other than the words people read. Action is louder than words, as the saying goes. Personally, I had the same issue with missing person posts, especially on Facebook. It costs nothing to reshare a missing person post, except that like 80% of the time, the person was already found. So without doing anything, even so much as reading, there was the action of reposting was considered some sort of effort. And so here again, moderation, the value of these posts is very small. It's really the effect they have on other people. So when you moderate things, posts of any kind, content in general, when you moderate, you are having an impact on both sides, the person that posted it, but also the people that may or may not then be able to consume it. And the utility of those posts will vary. So like I said, if there's zero cost, if it's completely effortless to express condolences in a social media platform, the value, the perceived value to the reading, the consuming public is interesting, but it becomes easy. It becomes part of the noise. And when it's algorithmically influenced, part of your moderation to benefit your revenue streams might be to skew presentation based on engagement. Condolences may not even be seen. So the cost in general is I have expressed my condolences. I've published it in social media. And because the algorithm is doing some moderation of a sort to craft a feed for each of their individual users, that entire process leaves my sentiments unseen or unconsumed. So it is a challenge, and the user stakes are such that by giving in to the platform and its policies, your minimal efforts are not always seen and thus appreciated. So it's something to think about. So the game, there's probably a game theory discussion to be had. Cancellation for unpopular expression is a popular point of contention. People are always suspicious of the algorithm that someone is censoring them, quote unquote censoring. There is only individual responsibility. That means I can join any platform and then I get to post whatever I want. What about the invitation participation? So the process, that is. So suppose rather than just being able to walk in, I must be invited in. I must have some sort of a referral. This happens sometimes with beta invites. This was true most recently with Blue Sky. This was true back in the very old days with Gmail, Google Mail. Have to have an invite. So the downside is, I have 20 invites. Who wants one? So the invites become a viral marketing scheme rather than a community curation scheme. It would be interesting to see in our game theory view whether the consequences of being a bad actor on a platform had consequences that spread to the original invitor, and whether endorsement of the poster beyond likes and shares would have any consequence on the quality of the content of any particular poster of any content. So in other words, liking and sharing a specific post, some people will say this is not an endorsement of something, and that's never how it's taken. So liking and sharing is always automatically presume that you completely agree with the content, notions, ideologies of the person who made the post that you are retweeting. There's no context. It doesn't matter. This is problematic sometimes, often. So how do you deal with that? Possibly add the specific not controversial, not not open for interpretation, whether you endorse a person or an account, I guess, or not. Sort of a global thumb up or down or whatever. You may completely disagree with a politician or some other individual or even company, but every once in a while they say something interesting. So you may not appreciate Wendy's as a company, the fast food restaurant, but occasionally they get into a fast food Twitter war, or X war, I guess, making snarky comments. So you may not endorse Wendy's as a company, but you may find a post of theirs humorous. So liking or resharing one humorous post does not change your entire notion of the company. So if in our game we enable people to specifically endorse, and by inviting someone, specifically endorse the person you invited, and have that become visible so that you know at any given time who is endorsing you, but also other people do as well. So I can look at anybody and say, oh, you have endorsements from 1 million people. Why they're endorsed, that might be a whole different thing. Celebrities will probably get fan endorsements, but a negative post, a negative something that is very unpopular may receive a lot of vitriol, but the endorsements may not change. These are interesting metrics that could be publicly visible to see actual impact and social standing, I guess. I hate to say social score, but if we are going to have this terrain where numbers are visible and metrics matter, then why not include metrics that are visible and durable? They don't change with a particular post. You are committed by endorsing someone or unendorsing them, and show that so that people can see, this person is losing favor with the world. Something to think about. There's also no due process. Google is famous for this. If you get canceled on Google Plus this was a problem there, but in general, you have a problem with Google, you are out of luck. You'll never speak to a person. YouTube has YouTube account manager type people, so there's a possibility there. But if you're just some person, if I get harassed in YouTube video comments, my recourse is to report a comment. If it becomes a mob situation, how does that get dealt with? So there's no real due process available to people, the general public, as they participate in a platform. It depends on the platform, depends on how they've automated the responses. You could end up in Facebook jail with no chance of parole. You can be permanently banned for something that you're not even sure of. I will say I tried to register an Instagram account for a project we were doing here in Vegas, and they didn't like the name. It was a normal name. It was nothing too spectacular. And then I contacted support and said, I don't understand why this was rejected. And they said, the response was like, well, that's the way it is, and it's permanently banned from use, right? So could not complete the registration. We're done. So the rules of the platform, nebulous and vague, and the interaction with the support person who made the final decision, I guess, also nebulous and vague. So due process, a little bit questionable. So the game being played here is I want to use your platform to promote my thing. You're not going to let me. What am I going to do? That game is over pretty quickly. So here in Vegas, we are looking at the Innovate for Vegas Foundation. That is the thing I'm the managing director of, a nonprofit public charity. We are looking at our smart social platform deployment to try to connect and communicate with our smart city. Las Vegas is a smart city. I don't know if you knew that. I don't know if it knows it. So if we can enable some new communication ideas to keep our smart city communicating within itself and beyond, that would be fun. So what if we have a Mastodon server, so a decentralized federated social media platform, public posts, but we're a nonprofit. We don't really have deep pockets to deal with lawyers or mob complaints and so on. So how do we moderate content on such a platform? We can see daily issues on a platform like the X, which is, I don't know what it is today, but say something close to $19 billion platform. We don't have that kind of money. So how do we moderate our platform so that we don't upset, offend, or even enable crime, hate crimes, and so on, and worse if it's taken to real life. How do we do that while also increasing or at least providing a baseline utility of the platform so that people can make use of it? I've mentioned a couple of things here relevant. So possibilities in general that we're looking at aside from Mastodon. Self-publishing is something that I believe people should return to. You own your content, you do whatever you like with it, and then syndicate it. And so one of our components will be not quite an RSS reader, but an aggregator to gather content that people control themselves. So rather than publishing on the platform, you publish what you want and you syndicate it for others to consume. So you control your content. You don't control the syndication consumers, but anyone is free to consume your content through syndication. This was the beauty of RSS feeds, morphed into Atom feeds. Today, personally, I think schema.org markup for human plus machine readable content, but I'm getting away from the topic here. So self-publishing, micro communities are really taking off. Everything from Slack, Discord, private chats like Telegram has, Signal has, Matrix has. So the ability to create micro communities and have discussions where the terms of the platform vary, of course. Discord has its rules. You can spin up your own Matrix Synapse server and host your own. Completely capable text and more chat. You could run an IRC server if you want. So the tools are out there to enable formation and maintenance of micro communities with or without third-party rules. So it's possible to do and say what you like in those contexts, and whatever consequences fall from it, that's for you and your community to determine. And then larger sharing platforms with more complications require more complicated moderation schemes, and sometimes there's more at stake on the advertiser side, so it can be a challenge. Now is a good time to flip through best practices for social media platforms. So this is published at Penn State. Best practices for managing and moderating community social media groups. It's a short read. Some reasons people join communities: to share and receive information, to develop and maintain local connections, to look for services, right? So sort of a directory with a casual recommendation or scoring system. You could also go to something like Yelp. Google has business reviews, etc. So you can either go to something purpose-built or you can just look for opinions. To discuss issues, that's kind of a challenge lately. Discuss is a word you don't really hear anymore. And then, of course, to promote business. I've already said you're either promoting yourself or you're being paid to promote somebody else. So I'll just read the headlines here. It's pretty interesting. You establish your standards. So like I said, at Salon, it was a little bit nebulous. Over time, there have been much more specific and even more strict rules about what can be published. There are some actual laws. COPA, the Child Online Privacy Protection Act, says you have to be at least 13 and what information you can collect. And then GDPR in Europe is tightening that even more about what information you can collect from whom and how you can use it. So standards like that can be spelled out for what you can say and do on our platform. This is not a public square. That should really be set up front. I think that might help in a lot of cases. Multiple admins. Instead of our one person at Salon, you should have many that are in charge of this. And in fact, you should probably have something like a committee or something like the distributed moderation model where people in the community are part. So it's transparent, right? So shadow banning, now very controversial. That's deviating significantly, I think, from the spirit and intent of social media platforms as they were initially conceived. Now it's just a money machine. So you must protect the revenue stream. And I've already made references in some other podcasts, but I'll say Cory Doctorow probably have an episode on this specifically, as his notions of what I refer to keep it clean and poopification of platforms. He coined the term in early 2023 concerning TikTok. It's the move from attracting users to attracting advertisers to being completely revenue centric. So along that timeline, you become more and more money hungry and less good for the people that are powering your platform. So have multiple admins, which encourages some transparency. Respect the members of the organization, the community, the group, and that's a two-way street. So the very process of moderation should not generate more vitriol. That's bad news. Engage members. Just be interactive. So being inclusive and don't be a Crystal Palace or a ivory tower, I suppose, even better, where rulings are handed down and there's no recourse, no due process. This happens frequently at Facebook. I already mentioned my Instagram story, sometimes YouTube. Don't delete posts or comments. This is a tricky one. Twitter at some point resorted to making you delete your own tweets. Occasionally posts will be made invisible so that they can reverse it, but oftentimes a post or a piece of content that receives enough backlash, feedback, will not be visible anymore. You don't get to show that on our platform. Don't remove members. That's a tricky one too. Cancellation can be social or it can be real. You can be really removed from platforms. This has been in the news enough, so we can leave that there. But interesting article, Penn State. That was in the show notes. Let me scroll to that. Some best practice suggestions. There's the link. So my proposal for our Mastodon rollout, for example, is to make it invite only. I know that sounds crazy. What I would like is to, rather than having a free-for-all, you actually say, in order to join, and Fosstodon, by the way, has done this. Fosstodon was experiencing some trouble with posts and people posting on the platform and joining the platform willy-nilly. So initially you had to apply. You had to say, here's what I do. So I develop open source stuff. So Fosstodon was appropriate. There was no problem there. Innovate for Vegas has an account there. So we're an open source nonprofit. Fosstodon, FOSS, free open source software. Great. They moved to an invite-only scheme now, so in order to join, you must be invited by an existing member. I think that's not a bad idea. These are micro-community style server instances, the federation scheme, the activity pub, so the Fediverse, as they call it, the activity pub protocol, the activity stream content that it shares, makes connection between micro-communities a little bit more useful than something like Discord or Slack, although I think Discord is actually adding activity pub support. So invite only plus explicit endorsements by other members. So the original inviter becomes your first endorser. And so if you become a bad actor, you are no longer, I got an invite, I join a community, Blue Sky, whatever, and then I start being a jerk. The person that invited you should be a part of that picture, and people should be able to see who invited you. So now, not only are you being looked at side eye, right? Like, why are you posting this bad stuff? The person that invited you is now like, what did you bring this person into this group for? Everything was fine until you. And I have to wonder, because I don't believe that Blue Sky makes that information public, even though it was, I received an email from Blue Sky with 5 invites or something. I'm not a member of Blue Sky. I've never tried it. If you merely invite people for the viral marketing to grow your user base, but you have no connection between the invitation and the person who joins, no visible history and endorsement, you are basically leaving it to chance that this person's not going to invite the worst people they know. And then while I'm not a fan of the social score, I am interested and possibly a fan of maintaining a platform-only credibility and offense metrics, also visible to all. Let me give you an example. The second interaction I had in this realm was a startup that we attempted to start in Silicon Valley back in, I want to say it was like 2007, 8, 9, maybe 2009. A friend of mine was opening a restaurant. He received reviews. I think it was on Yahoo Reviews at the time. The reviewers gave like 1-star reviews, commenting on the parking lot, or the best one, not open yet. You see, people were posting 1-star reviews like 2 months before the restaurant was even supposed to open. And there was no recourse. There was no you couldn't remove reviews. That would break the entire model. Yelp is actually kind of vocal about this. Like you cannot pay to remove bad reviews. So what are you going to do? People are free to post whatever they want. They post something ridiculous like the restaurant isn't even open, and that remains. So we were throwing around some ideas, and we came up with valid rate. I was never too fond of the name, but it is very explicitly what it was about. So rather than having a 1-star review that remains forever, you would actually, first of all, reviews would sort of age. So a review from 5 years ago, especially for a restaurant, 5 years ago, none of the people that were working in the restaurant then are there anymore. The menu has changed. Possibly the owner has changed. So a review from 5 years ago or some number of years ago is no longer relevant. So as well, people tend to post their life story in a review. Me and my girlfriend went to this restaurant and we ordered 25 things, and then my friends came out. There's a whole tale to tell. I just want to know, how are the pierogies? Is their coffee good? Croissant? Are they delicious? Are they buttery? Are they dry? Whatever. I just want to know specific things. So we had this notion, what about micro reviews? You would post a very granular Twitter-sized review, and then other people would indicate whether that was accurate or ridiculous, or maybe you're just being a jerk. So if you said, when I walked in the door, the host was inattentive, and we left without getting a table. And then people say, that's ridiculous. I know that person. Or that night, the person their brother had just been in a car accident, or whatever. Like, there are circumstances that could be added. And you're seeing this now in Twitter posts, X posts, about some sort of fact checking, right? So you could literally say, hey, this was a weird night. This is not totally applicable, and scale the response accordingly. Or maybe somebody is just trying to be offensive, and those submissions could be diminished in value. So not only do those not constructive, see, a negative review could be constructive. So to say something like the flavors were inauthentic, that's a valid opinion. There's no reason to vote that down. Now, we did have to deal with gang or mob gaming of the system. I don't like that person. Let's all downvote their submission. So that's always going to be a problem, except that if you keep track of those in the same way, so you're basically applying some Bayesian analysis to initial assumptions and then the corrections that add up over time from people up and down voting things. So we had this model of evaluating the validity of the ratings on the ratings. Kind of an interesting idea, I thought. So the original poster, visible ranking, like whether what they have to say appears in a higher or more visible place versus below the fold or out and back, would be impacted based on whether they were just being a jerk or whether they were posting inaccurate or vengeful information, or if they were actually being constructive. And we didn't really experiment with this, but the possibility of the proprietor being able to indicate whether a particular issue had been resolved, right? So if person was offensive, employee said or did something that was offensive, and other people said, yeah, I've seen that too. Well, that person doesn't work here anymore. The entire establishment's general review score, and by the way, the 5-star system is broken, that's another moderation problem, right? I gave it 5 stars because it was an excellent place. Well, I gave it 1 star because it wasn't open yet. Stars become meaningless. So moderation of that form, equally troubling. So the notion of being able to imply that something was fixed and then having people, oh yes, it was fixed, and then having an overall ranking, if there was even that possibility, be affected accordingly, was part of the plan because it would be a valid rate. Given the timing, the economy at the time, our seed funding fell through. We were never able to really launch that, but it was a good idea. We had a bunch of code. It would have been cool. So at the end of the day, the problem with moderation is it is not always applied with moderation. Now, it is sometimes used in heavy-handed ways. It is very often influenced, not always in a transparent way, by revenue. Advertisers often have much more say if you publish anything of any kind and you have advertisement and your advertiser calls you or emails you and says, hey, I don't like that, what are you going to do? The same is true if you have a subscriber base. Salon had subscribers. We had paying subscribers and advertisers. So you had to keep both happy. Paying subscribers were like a third of their revenue, roughly. This was a long time ago, so no longer relevant. But at the time, paying subscribers, advertisers, they both had skin in the game, literally, money in the game. So you moderate, or your entire platform content scheme is shaped by how you get to stay in business. Now, as it happens, Salon had interested benefactors who were not overly concerned with ad revenue or subscriber revenue, but it was a public company, so all these numbers had to be made visible. But moderation is a big challenge. It's something we'll be taking on here in Vegas. And so it's a topic of discussion to be had and rehad over time. The solution is almost certainly going to include some form of transparency so that people don't feel they are being censored, but that they are part of a community. They're part of a, however you define community. They're part of a group of other people who want something and who don't want other things. They want, and I just listed off a couple of them from that other article. So they sometimes want news, or they sometimes want, Pinterest. I want to see pictures of products that interest me. Twitter, I want to see some sort of knockdown, drag out fight between political ideologies, and maybe some, epithets. I had to be careful with that one. So different types of quote unquote communities form and emerge and are fueled by participation from different types of personalities. So this is something that people should be maybe aware of. And when you have a closed micro community, something like Discord, invite only, especially if you have to pay to be a member or something, you are curating the community. And therefore, when someone is a bad actor, perhaps you kick them out. But if you do connect participation with endorsement, which is one of my proposals that I've made here. So what do we do about it? You take, or you assign, or you make publicly visible some responsibility. If you're a Donnie Brasco fan, you know the difference between a friend of ours and a friend of mine. So if you bring someone into the group and they turn out to be bad, you should be more careful next time. Not quite the same consequences, but if one person starts bringing in people that cause trouble, maybe that person shouldn't be bringing more people in. And it doesn't have to be quite so draconian, but the possibility of responsibility for community health, as they say, is a real thing. And it's, I believe, part of a better or more tenable moderation scheme. But I believe there is general agreement that moderation is a truly hard problem. It's not one that will be magically solved with the snap of the fingers. Time and time again, AI has demonstrated it becomes heavily biased very quickly. And so automating these things almost certainly leads to trouble. And here again, YouTube and Facebook face this all the time. I have a feeling my Instagram tail was an automation that, landed in someone's support escalation inbox, and they saw no reason to correct the initial assessment, which was completely bizarre. But what are you going to do? Don't use Instagram anymore. It's a waste. There you go. So I'll leave it there. I think this is a topic that will come up again. It will almost certainly come up directly in the context of our Smart Social MyMuni overall projects and how they are deployed, and the inclusion or integration with a Mastodon instance for the greater Vegas area. So we will revisit these topics, but I just wanted to plant a seed here. A couple of ideas about what works, what does not. The what can we do about it part will almost certainly be a work in progress, and hopefully will involve participation from people like you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing and liking and all the other things we just talked about. But like I said, I have a tip jar at the buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo. The funds go for actual coffee. I do want to give a shout, even though it was for the Quaggling Sand, Any Computer, Anywhere, Anytime episode. Jordan, a former colleague from my Silicon Valley days, much to his surprise, I'm sure, got me some 1 kilogram of Lavazza coffee beans. I have 2 kilograms, so I'll leave it to mystery to see which one he actually got. But so thanks for that. Support of any kind is appreciated, not just financial, but just generally listening, telling other people, being a guest on the show, etc. The Buy Me a Coffee profile page has links to the various shows and other productions and projects. It will grow over time. It's a reasonable place that combines the ability to find things in one simple place and also throw some money in the coffee tip jar if you like. I'm trying not to make this a hard sell, just putting it out there. Vegas, a city built on the inability to do math and tips. With that, I will leave you. It is December 7th, a day that will live in infamy.